everyone, this is Faith of Faith and Books. How are you doing? Oh, my engine just kicked on. Okay, maybe I'll turn it on. It's windy out. The wind has really picked up. Anyway, I'm just making another video in the car. Forgive me for being in the car so much. This is a tag. This is to celebrate the Ides of March. So hopefully this will go up on the Ides of March. And it's a tag. It's There's No Place Like Rome tag. And so, you know, if you have a channel, please consider yourself tagged. And if you don't have a channel, you can answer these questions in the comment section. All right. So there's so much to talk about when you're talking about ancient Rome that I limited these questions to 7, and they're each named after one of the 7 hills of Rome. Because when I was coaching a Cretamen team, that was one of the questions, one of the history or the Roman culture questions. They would say, do you name the 7 hills of Rome? So, and when I was in Rome, which I will get to in a second, I did not even notice the hills. I mean, you would see signs for it, but it was like, oh, okay, this is a hill. Anyway, so the first question is the Palatine Hill, where Rome started. That's where Romulus started to build Rome, where Rome started and where all roads would eventually lead. If you have been to Rome, tell us some of the highlights. If you haven't been, what would you most like to see? So I have been to Rome twice, but back in my 20s, so over 30 years ago. And I was in my early 20s, and then actually I was 30, I think. Yeah. So I don't have that great of a memory. And also, I wasn't just focusing on ancient Rome. In fact, I think I was not focusing on ancient Rome when I was there. I was focusing more on the Renaissance and later. So I just remember, and I'm not even a fashion person, but just watching the Romans dress so nicely. And there were all these fashionable shops. I remember the area, the neighborhood right at the bottom of the Spanish Steps was full of these glamorous fashion shops, and I liked walking around there. So there were other things that were great about Rome that didn't have anything to do with ancient Rome. But I did see the Forum and the Colosseum, and I remember that. I remember the Colosseum. I remember being really impressed by just how huge it was and how they had it designed. And I remember walking around the Forum, I hope this is a correct memory. When I was a kid, I saw a movie about a guy who liked to go, it was Italian, a guy who liked to go to funerals. And in the end of the movie, he goes to his own funeral. He winds up going to his own funeral. It was kind of a comedy. And if you know this movie, tell me the name of it. But one of the things was he took care of all these stray cats. And in the Forum, there were all these cats. And I remember noticing that there were actually cats in the Forum and being all excited, like, oh, there are cats in the Forum. The other thing I remember is when I went with my husband when I was 30, we'd just been married a year. We went to Italy and we took a bus. I don't know why we did this. We wanted to live like the Romans lived or something, and I guess save money. So we took a bus to this, to catacombs outside the city. And I think it was St. Calixtus or something. It might be the same saint. I don't know this. I'll have to see if I can find out. Same saint that I'm going to talk about in another question. And we didn't realize that we got there just as it was closing. It was closing early that day or something. And we went in. So somehow we got tickets and we went in and we're wandering around. We noticed that there was nobody around. And so we wandered back to the entrance, and they had closed the gate. And so we thought we were going to be trapped in these catacombs, and we started screaming and rattling the gate. And a few minutes, I mean, it took a little bit. Somebody came and opened it and let us out. But phew, we thought we were going to be stuck in these catacombs overnight. So that's something that I really remember from my trip to Rome. Of course, we saw St. Peter's, and there's just so many things to see in Rome. It's a wonderful city. I loved the energy of it. I just loved it. My husband was not a city person at that time. I think he's mellowed, but he didn't really like how big and bustling it was. He preferred, we also went to Florence and Venice and Sorrento and Capri. And so, yeah, so, all right. Okay, next question. Esquiline Hill, home of Nero's Golden Palace. It is said that Nero fiddled while Rome burned. The only trouble is the fiddle wasn't invented until the early 1500s. What surprising thing have you learned or unlearned about the ancient Romans? And I have several of these, if I can think of them right now. One of them was about the Colosseum, because I remember when we went, so I didn't realize it, but there were several floors below the floor of the Colosseum. There's a whole network of rooms underground, and they would bring the wild animals in these cages, and they would put them in an elevator, and then they would move up. They would use a pulley system, bring the elevator up, and then open the door automatically, like with another pulley system, and to let the animals out. And that was surprising. The other thing is that we went to Pompeii, and that was absolutely amazing. So I really learned a lot there. And one of the things that surprised me, and probably everybody else knew this except me, is that they built the roads, they had regulations for how they would build their roads. So the roads would have curbs, and then and kind of high curbs to keep water and refuse and stuff easy to wash down the road. And then they would have these regulation height stepping stones that they would build to go across the road. So if it was flooded or that it was gross, you could step across. And these were regulation width, because they had also regulated the size of the carts that came into the city so that they could go through the stepping stones, so the stepping stones wouldn't stop traffic. So I never realized that they had done all that they have all these regulations. And I thought it was pretty clever. And there's a place behind my house where they actually have stepping stones like that. And every time I go behind my house to walk around this pond we have back there, I think of the Romans. And there's this meme about how often do you think of the Roman Empire? And I didn't really see it because I'm not on other social media that much anymore. But I do remember seeing it a little bit, like somebody would say, how often do you think of the Roman Empire? People have mentioned this. Matt at Baskin, the story, have mentioned it. I think Steve Donahue mentioned this meme that's going around. But I actually think about the Roman Empire a lot. And one of the reasons is every time I see those stepping stones behind my house, it reminds me of when I first saw stepping stones like that in Pompeii. So that to me was really interesting. I just learned that Romans invented keys. And there was some other really interesting fact that I can't remember now. But anyway, yeah, it's the Romans were really advanced in a lot of ways when it came to engineering. Oh, I know what I just learned. You know how you hear these stories about how the Romans built with lead? They built their pipes with lead, and so they probably had lead poisoning. That led to the downfall of the Roman Empire. Well, they have studied Roman skeletons, and there's not enough lead in them. They've tested they've tested the actual bone to see what's in it, and there's not enough lead in there for it to be lead poisoning. So they don't think that theory is actually a viable theory. And I just learned that a couple days ago. All right, number 3, Capitoline Hill. So we get the word capital from this. Et tu, Brute? So the famous words that Julius Caesar utters in the play Julius Caesar by Shakespeare. Just before, was it Mark Antony? No, it wasn't Mark Antony, it was Brutus, stabs him. What work have you read that portrays a terrible betrayal? Bonus points if it has to do with the ancient world. Well, I'm just going to go for something really obvious. In the Aeneid, when Aeneas leaves Dido. I think that's a pretty heartfelt kind of wrenching episode in the story of the Aeneid, where Dido, and I forget now because it's been years since I've read the Aeneid. Wasn't she like? Was there some kind of a spell, or had she had a potion or something where she was in love with Aeneas? It wasn't her fault, in other words, but because fate said that Aeneas had to go found Rome, he couldn't stay with Dido. So he leaves her, and she, kills herself by throwing herself on this funeral pyre, and he can see it from his ship. He knows that she's killed herself. Anyway, I'm just going to say that, and of course that is ancient. Okay, Aventine Hill, where the plebeians lived. From their great struggle came some noble ideas. What is your favorite work of literature from ancient Rome? And I'm going to cheat again because I haven't read that much from ancient Rome, frankly, and I'm going to say the Aeneid. I really enjoyed reading this years ago, and I want to reread it. I had read the Iliad and the Odyssey more than maybe 3 times, and the Iliad twice, before I finally got to the Aeneid. And I'm so glad I did that, because as I was reading this, I could recognize how Virgil was structuring it and what he was referring to. There's so many parallels, like deliberate parallels and deliberate references in this, that it was really, it really jumped out at me, and it really made me appreciate the Aeneid a lot. So I'm going to say the Aeneid. Right now, though, I really like Horace, so maybe Horace will be up there too after I finish March. Okay, the Caelian or Caelian Hill, where the rich lived. What is your richest or favorite resource about ancient Rome? And I'm going to say that it is, when I was homeschooling, we used to watch a lot of the great courses, and we got one called The Foundations of Western Civilization. It was taught by Professor Noble. Now, it wasn't just about Rome. It was all, it was a Western Civ course, but it put everything in context for me, and it really made me appreciate ancient Rome. So I'm going to say that. I'm going to say the great courses, and the great courses have lots of lecture series on Rome. So if you want to really do a deep dive into Roman history, it's a great resource. So I'm going to recommend them. I'll list them below. Number 6, the Corneal Hill, the highest hill with the best views. What is your favorite novel or work set in Rome? So I have 3. I'm cheating. And when I say set in Rome, I mean Roman times. I don't mean the city of Rome necessarily. So the 3 that I'm thinking of are Quo Vadis, which was written around the turn of the last century, and I think it won a prize. Like I forget what prize, but it maybe a Nobel or a Pulitzer, or no, maybe. Anyway, it was translated from the Polish, and the author's name is Henry, I think, and then a really long Polish name that begins with S, I think. And so I can't pronounce it. But it's the story of, it's basically about St. Peter, and and of course that's set in the time of Nero. So you're in the court of Nero, and you're following, I forget the protagonist's name. You're following this ambitious Roman, I don't know if he was a tribune or what he was, in Nero's court, and he falls in love with this Christian woman, and it was really good at evoking the tensions of the court and the Roman way of looking at things versus the Christian way of looking at things, and so well written. So really, really well done. I remember really enjoying, I got it out of the library. I remember really enjoying that book. I would like to reread it again. It was a really good book. Then I also really enjoyed Evelyn Waugh's Helena, which it's a story, it's his only historical fiction about the mother of Constantine. And I thought it was really a very interestingly written. And Evelyn Waugh, is a great writer. He's always a little bit anti-Semitic, though. I think there was some of that in there. Those British, they did that. Anthony Trollope, too. Everybody. But anyway, yeah. So Helena by Evelyn Waugh, also excellent. And then the last one, and I read this book for the very first Victober that I ever participated in, and that was Callista by St. John Henry Cardinal Newman. So he actually wrote a couple of novels. I haven't read the other one. It kind of, people kind of pan it, but this I thought was really good. Now he writes in a very high, formal Victorian style, so a lot of big vocabulary words, and it starts in medias res, so you kind of you don't quite know what's going on. It's set in North Africa during a persecution. I forget which emperor was persecuting at that time, and they're going after the Christians and in this town in northern Africa, and but I stuck with it. At first I was like, am I going to really be able to get into this novel? But I did, and it gets better and better, and the ending is really, really great. So Callista by John Henry Cardinal Newman. And I don't know if that's the same saint that was the catacombs that we almost got stuck in. I can't remember. Isn't that bad? I really want to go back to Rome so I can revisit the catacombs. All right, and then the last question is the Aventine Hill, the smallest of the hills. So we're just going to go with a motto or slogan. What is your favorite Latin saying? So I think I have two, because I can't seem to keep things to one. One is festina lente, which means hurry up slowly. And so I totally stole this from somebody, I don't know who, but years ago, I heard somebody say that they really liked that saying because whenever they were trying to get out the door, they had to get something done quickly, they would say to themselves, festina lente. So to me, it meant you do things very quickly, you're very focused on what you're doing, but you're very methodical. You're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and then you're going to do this, and boom, 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 boom. And it's great if you're a mother of many and you're trying to get them out the door or whatever. That phrase comes into my head, festina lente, and I know I stole that from somebody. And the other one, let's see if I can remember how it goes. It's ad astra per aspera. I think that's how you say it, and it's to the stars through hardship. And I think I think it's the saying for some state. The saying, the motto that Virginia has, my state has, is, what is it? Sic semper tyrannis. Thus always to tyrants. But that's not my favorite saying. I really like the ad astra per aspera, I think it is. Aspera is like asperity, so difficulty. Per is through, ad means to, astra is star. So to the stars through adversity, basically. And I think it's a great saying because I think a lot of times people get stuck on the hardships and they don't realize how beneficial it is in that struggle. Nobody wants to struggle, but you're going to encounter struggle. It's inevitable. In this life, you're going to encounter struggle. And the thing is, if you keep your eyes on the stars, and you persevere through it, you will grow, and you will be, you'll be a better human being. And you can't. I think in this day and age, we tend to really embrace victimhood a lot, and it's to our own demise. I think we need to more embrace the fact that we're going to get through, that we're focused on the stars, and we're going to get through the adversity. And that's who we are, people who make it through adversity, and they're better off afterwards. And I think the world needs that. I think the world needs a little bit of stoicism, because I think we've become too identified with our own trauma. To be human is to be traumatized. It's just the way it is. That's just the way this life goes. And so if you embrace that trauma too much and you make it too much of your identity, I think it's detrimental. And so ad astra, we need to look at the stars. We need to move towards the stars. All right, so that is my tag. I tag everybody who is watching this, and I do hope that my co-host will make a tag too to celebrate the March, the Ides of March. Yeah, to celebrate the Ides of March. Okay, all right. So I will talk to you later, and happy reading.